Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the workshop Plastic Waste to Product Interface. This workshop is created by the Primus project, is a European project funded by the European Union. And in this workshop, we are going to explore the barriers and opportunities from plastic waste to product interface. My name is Carolina Mejia from Mondragon Corporation, and I'll be explaining you the first part of the workshop. And afterwards, we will have two main presenters, that is Mathilde Taveau and Tenhunen-Lunkka, that I will present them afterwards. So in today's agenda, we'll have a first opening and objective that I will explain a little bit what's the objective of this webinar. Then we will present quickly the Primus objective, the European project that we are involved in. Afterwards, we will have a legislative context surrounding waste to product interface, then a summary of findings gathered during some interviews that we did before this workshop, and then we will have an interactive session with a Miro tool validating the barriers and opportunities identified in the interviews, and you can add some of your problems, barriers, and opportunities. Afterwards, we will have a wrap up and next steps and questions and answers. For all of you, let you know that this webinar will be recorded and afterwards will be published in our YouTube channel and in our Primus website. And if you have any question, please write it down in the chat, and we will have a Q&A session after the presentation and in the at the end of the webinar. Okay. So thank you for the newcomers, to let you know that the Plastic Waste to Product Interface webinar is part of the Primus European project. So the Primus objective is to create safe and sustainable secondary plastic for added value products, in our case for automation and home appliances. So one of the missions of our project is to create a wide European definition of recyclate plastic, considering the regulation, the legislative parts, as well as the perspective of the whole value chain. So the webinar will review the legal text surrounding the plastic waste product interface to establish the legal boundaries in which the EU accepted the definition of recyclates, and taking into account the end of waste criteria. So this webinar also will summarize the input from various regions of the European Union on how plastic recyclate is defined, what currently accepted verification method exists for recyclate content in products, and what is required to guarantee the safety of products and legal compliance with specific sector legislation. So be part of this webinar. Is an interactive session at the end, and you will discover the findings and contribute to validating the study towards a broadly accepted EU definition of plastic recyclates. So for this session, we'll have two presenters today. It will be Mathilde Taveau. She's regulatory affairs manager at Plastic Recyclers Europe. Sorry. Welcome, Mathilde. Thank you for being here. We are really lucky to have her as our Primus regulatory work package leader. She holds a master in chemical engineering, specialized in materials and processes. Her graduation research on the development of polypropylene recyclates from old household appliances led her to the plastic recycling world. So she had been working as a plastic engineering at a recycling facility, and she is now focused on the chemical legislation as well as on R&D project at plastic recyclers. Thank you for being here, Mathilde. And we also have Tenhunen-Lunkka, that we are lucky to have her as our project coordinator. She works as a senior scientist and project manager at VTT. of Finland and is experienced in RDI, environmental and chemical process engineering. Her research is focused on sustainable circular economy and materials and product circulation, taking into account the recycling and reuse as well as operational environments to support the scale up and implementation of systemic and technical solutions. So thank you both for being here. The next part will be Anna taking the floor and explaining us a little bit of the Primus project. So Anna, please let me know when should I change slides.
Thank you, Carolina, very much. Good morning to everybody also on my behalf from somewhat foggy Finland, but great to have you all online. And I will try to be short and sweet, but our project is quite interesting. So let's get cracking into what Primus is all about. So we aim to support the circulation of non-recycled or underutilized technical plastics. And we aim to create added value products, so in the automotive and electronics and home appliance side, from these waste streams to support market development of recycled plastics and capture the value that is lost today. And how we're doing that, we're focusing on advanced mechanical recycling, and we couple it with different types of novel pre-treatment and analytics that we're developing in the project. You can, Carolina, take the next slide, please. Thank you. So here you can see a snapshot of who are working in the Primus project. So we are about 1.5 years into our project. So we're somewhat in the midpoint of it all. So we started in May 2020. Our overall budget is about 7 million euros. And we are a research and innovation action type of a project. So our aim is to take the solutions that we develop from around TRL 3 to 6. We have 10 partners altogether and a few affiliated entities. If you take the next one, you can see a little bit more details on the partners, but what we have brought into the Primus consortia, we have universities and RTOs, of course, as usual, but the industry associations and different businesses that are involved, the idea is to cover quite a bit of the value chains that we're working on. You can take the next slide. Thank you. So from the research area perspective, we have a few different angles to what we're working on in Primus. So this regulatory legislation, operational environment, it's a key part of it, and that's why we're kind of gathered here today to focus more on the plastic waste to product interface and the different barriers and opportunities that there are. Then we're focusing quite a bit on plastic waste feedstock analysis, sampling methods, different characterization methods. Then we have the novel pre-treatment there as well, for example, depromination methods. Focusing on recycling and upgrading recyclates, so really putting a lot of efforts into developing very high performing recipes, because we actually then take the recyclates towards different demonstrations where we do production tests and validation to make sure that the recyclates meet up with the standards of high performing products. Then we have a little bit of this blockchain approach also. Oh, if you could go back just a little bit, and how the supply chain can be secured, and of course environmental impact assessments are critical. And then we have both angles to kind of increase the market uptake from the industry side, but also from the social side. You can take the next one then. So I think Carolina already mentioned a little bit about our objectives, but in a nutshell, the idea is that we want to create quality and safe recyclates and support the use of these recycled plastics as safe materials that have high traceability. We aim to demonstrate 4 novel added value demo cases in the project. And we do want to, of course, increase the uptake of the recyclate and the growth of it with this advanced mechanical recycling, depromination, pre-treatment, and analytics that we're developing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just then to highlight the 4 demo cases. So all the activities, the technical things that we're doing, they kind of culminate to the demo cases that we have. So the first pilot is an automotive interior. Of course, it has quite a lot of aesthetics and also mechanical properties that are quite critical. Then the next second pilot, is the automotive cooling circuit. And so again, we know that there has to be quite a lot of high-performing properties when you're dealing with chemicals, also good mechanical strength, and so on. Then the third pilot is our refrigerator to refrigerator case. So here the idea is to take the plastic waste from refrigerators and put it back into refrigerators in food contact. So really the inner layer of the refrigerator. And of course here it's a quite novel thing to be working on, ensuring the safety aspects and that there's no migration from the materials to food. So the demand in application comes definitely from the food contact side. Then we have another interesting kind of a closed loop demonstration. The fourth one, it's these washing machine door seals. So idea is also to be able to take this currently not utilized seal from washing machines and be able to process it back into new seals. So quite a lot of technical challenges there as well. If you jump to the next one, that's my last one. So hope you got an idea of what we're working on in the project. You can see a nice dyno QR code, so you can scan it and join our newsletter and Primus community through that to stay up to date. But this is what I had for Primus. Thank you very much. And I look forward to very interesting discussions and input from you guys in the afternoon session. Or not afternoon, but the upcoming session, you could say.
Yes. Thank
Afternoon
you,
in
Anna.
Finland. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
afternoon in Finland. Thank you, Anna, and thank you for that cute QR code with a dino. Now we could move forward to the second part of our webinar, where Mathilde will explain the legislation context. So welcome, Mathilde.
Yes, thank you very much, Carolina.
The floor is yours, and please let me know.
Thank you. So welcome everyone on my behalf. So before jumping into the interactive session and more the part on finding the barriers and opportunities surrounding the waste to product interface, I just wanted to bring back a small legislative context so that we all have the right tools in order to answer the question that will be afterwards in really the part of the workshop. So I'm not going to list all the different legislation that are in this interface because, as you may be aware, there is a lot of them, but I will focus in 2 main parts so you know a little bit the legislative context. Carolina, if we can go to the next slide. Yes. So the first thing is how this is looking like. So the first part that we have is, of course, a waste. Then we have a recycling process and then a product. This is very simplified. As you know, there is a lot of actors in the value chain, but here is the simplified version of the value chain where, we enter as a waste. So then we fall into the waste legislation in which we have different parts. So for example, here I listed 2. We have the Waste Framework Directive, and we also have the Waste Shipment Regulation that has specific rules for shipping waste across different borders, whether it's within the EU or outside of the EU. And then we have a recycling process. So during the recycling process, we do some specific treatment. So for example, sorting, grinding, shredding the material, washing, and so on and so forth. And then we come from a waste. Then we have the end of waste status. I will go a little bit deeper on this point afterwards. And after reaching the end of waste status, we enter the category of a product, and then we fall into the product legislation. And in the product legislation, if I give you some example here, we fall into, for example, the REACH legislation, which is on chemicals. We have the ROS legislation if the material is going back to an electronic product. which is the restriction of hazardous substances. We have the POPs regulation, which is on persistent organic pollutants, so also on substances. And all of this are the product legislation. And then we have food contact legislation. For example, this is a specific type because it's targeting a specific application. And there is the food contact regulation. So for example, what Anna explained before, so really the fridge to fridge, this is falling into this legislation because it will be a food contact application. And really on the product, because we will have achieved already the recycling process and the end of waste status. So then I will go deeper into this end of waste status because this is the key point where we jump from the waste legislation to the product legislation. Carolina, if you can go to the next slide. Yes, perfect. Thank you. So the end of waste status is really the point where the waste ceases to be a waste. There is currently a lot of legislative work that is ongoing, but more at the moment it's more preparatory work by the GRC, which is the Joint Research Center of the Commission. And here they're working into specifying the end of waste criteria, but especially for plastics. At the moment, we have some criteria that are defined. Those criteria are present in the Waste Framework Directive, and this is the 4 criteria that you see here. But as you can read on the slide, they're very generic criteria. And the idea of defining specific criteria for plastic is to give much more clarity, both to the actors, so like the recycler, on where they will reach and how they can reach the end of waste status, but also to the competent authority of the different member states in order to really understand which kind of criteria needs to be fulfilled for a material to become let's say, a recycled material to become really a product. And the advantage of having an end of waste criteria, but a wide end of waste criteria, is that it will be harmonized throughout the different member states, because at the moment we have a lot of different member states that creates some specific end of waste criteria for plastics, but those ones are not harmonized. So the idea here is really to have some work by the GRC so that in the end the Commission adopts end of waste criteria for plastic that will be harmonized throughout the EU. So this is quite important, and then it really marks when in the process the material is becoming a product and has to comply with the product legislation. Quite important also in terms of shipment, because shipping a waste and shipping a product is falling under very different consideration. So that's a little bit for the interface and the end of waste status. If we move on to the next slide. Another point that is quite relevant and that will maybe pop up in the discussion afterwards, so I thought maybe it will be relevant to put a small point on this, is the recycled content, and especially the recycled content targets. As you know, there is a new proposal for the PPWR, which is the Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation, upcoming one, where they put some specific targets for recycled content. This is still a proposal. But the proposed targets are as follows. This is what you can see on the right slide. So this is also an incentive that is placed in order to have more recycled plastic in new articles and new packaging in this specific case. But recycled content targets are also effective in other type of legislation and other type of article than packaging. This is what we can see in ELV, for example. They are also thinking about introducing those recycled content targets. So it's really moving in different area and different waste streams on how this recycled content targets could be implemented in order to boost the presence of recyclates in new articles. Of course, also the targets needs to be realistic and implementable in the end. And that's also an important point to take into consideration. If we move on to the next slide, I think that is it. Yes, that is it for this part. So this was really just on legislation, just to give you the right tools for the discussion afterwards. There is many legislation on this interface, but we will not go through all of them. Those ones are, let's say, the important one for the discussion afterwards. Based on this first point, what we have done within the Primus project is that we have conducted some interviews in order to identify some first barriers and opportunities surrounding this legislative context. Based on this, I will just present some key findings that we have highlighted throughout the value chain based on the actors that we have interviewed. And then afterwards, we will double check all together with the Miro board those barriers and opportunities. Carolina, if you can go to the next slide. So first of all, who has been interviewed? We have really focused on the entire value chain because, of course, there is different perspective and different barriers and opportunity that can be highlighted throughout this value chain. So we have done from waste collection, recycler and converter, then end user of the recyclates, and also some industry association that are located throughout the different part of the value chain. In total, we have conducted 12 interviews and from the different member states that are listed in the slide below. If we go to the next slide. So this is the three categories where we have clustered the barriers and opportunities. We will start with the barriers on collection, recycling, and article manufacturing. I will not list all of them because there is a lot that will be listed on the slide. This is what you're going to see, but a few of them, so that gives you like a little bit some ideas about what needs to be done afterwards in the Miro board. If we move on to the next slide. Yes. So first of all, on collection, there has been several points. One main point was the lack of harmonized collection throughout the EU that has been mentioned. And the second point is that the legislation was not well connected throughout the value chain. So this is not necessarily on collection. This is rather on the complete value chain, that sometimes we have conflicting legislation throughout the value chain. And therefore, it can be difficult, but also that sometimes all the legislation are focused on the end of the value chain or on specific area of the value chain, and therefore the burden seems to be concentrated in some areas. If we move on to the next slide. So on recycling, there was quite a lot of points that were highlighted. One point was that chemical recycling was not accepted as recycling into the legislation. So that was one big point. Illegal activities that are happening still in the waste area, and especially here mentioning e-waste. Lack of guideline regarding sampling, but also testing. We have, this is what we see, we have a lot of chemicals legislation, but lack of guidance in order to test those chemicals and to ensure compliance with those legislation. Then some vague requirements that are sometimes difficult to apply in practice. So really a gap between the legislation and the practice. And then a lot of changing legislation through times, because there is a lot of updates, of course, that are happening. If we move on to the next slide. On article manufacturing, so a lot came back, of course, on the design of the products, so that there is still a gap between the design of the product and the possibility of doing recycling. So still a lot of incentive are placed for more design for recycling and better design for recycling, but sometimes not effectively applied yet. Some actors mentioned the limited availability of high-quality recyclates for specific application that would require very technical standard. Then a problem with the prices. So to have really the recycled plastic that are much cheaper than new materials. So the prices that are quite let's say equal. Then the conflict between the different legislation that has been mentioned in different area of the value chain, and also the point that having a stronger link between the waste and the product legislation should be established, because there is also some conflict that has been identified. If we move on to the next slide. Yes, perfect. So I think on my side, that is it. Now I will let you with Carolina so she can explain you a little bit more on the Miro workshop and drive you through the different exercises that we have for you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mathilde. So in this fifth part, we have a Miro workshop taking into account all the information of the legislative part of that Mathilde just gave us and the different barriers that were identified in the interviews that she already organized. Then the main idea is to co-create with you further understandings of what are the necessities of all the stakeholders that are present in the workshop. So we have three main activities in a Miro board. First of all, we are going to learn a little bit how to use this Miro board because some of you could have some experience, but some others don't. So we are going to do an icebreaker to learn how to add a sticky note and some arrows in this Miro board. Then we will ask you, where are you located, just to have some information on at what part of the European Union you are right now. And then we'll move forward to the problem solution identification. So Etienne, if you could copy paste the link of the Miro board, thank you. So please enter all of you to the Miro board that Etienne just pasted on the chat, and we will move to the Miro board. This is how it looks right now. We are waiting for all the visitors to join. We already have 7 of you. We'll wait a couple of minutes more. You don't need to create a Miro account. You just need to enter the link and we will start the workshop. Okay, so I will bring everyone to me what I'm saying. So someone already started. Okay, so the first part is an icebreaker. As the Miro tool is like a workshop online tool, we are going to copy paste or add a sticky note. So in the left part of the screen, you can see a rectangle that it's a sticky note. So you could add the sticky note and write down, well, the necessary steps to launch a rocket. So you can be creative. Do you need to go to the bathroom first, or do you need to have a breakfast, or maybe have fuel for the moon rocket launch? And add an arrow. So this is quite important. If you click on the sticky note, you will see some blue points in the surroundings, so you could add an arrow to the moon rocket launch process. So this is just a trial. We'll have 2 minutes on this. If you have any troubles, please let us know in the chat of our teams. But it seems that everyone is doing great. Please remember to add the arrow, because creating the arrow is a good practice that we will use afterwards. Yeah. So who wrote build engine? We will need an arrow over here. An arrow. Arrow. Cool. It's easy, isn't it? Yes, we will need to celebrate at the end. It's quite easy, isn't it? Is anyone having troubles with the Miro board, adding a sticky note or adding an arrow? Let us know and we will help you with that. Someone added a star. That's great. Oh, press release. True. Okay, so I think that this icebreaker, it's finished. Quite great that everyone added a sticky note and knew how to add an arrow. If there's some visitor that is having troubles with the arrow, just take the blue point and grab the arrow to where you want to be. Okay, so I think it's quite clear. So we are moving forward to the second step. So the second step, okay, I will bring everyone to me. The first step is already finished. So let us know where are you located. So copy paste this arrow over here. So copy paste it as you please with right click or Control C, Control V, and let us know where are you located. A lot of Finland over here. 3 from France as well. Sweden, UK, Brussels, Germany, Spain. Okay, so Pierre in the chat is saying sorry, but okay for a sticky note, but could you repeat for creating an arrow? Okay, so you will, okay, I will show it in my screen, Pierre. If you have the chance to check my screen, Pierre, look, I add a sticky note over here, for instance, and then there are some blue dots around it in the surrounding. So you could click and drag the arrow to want it to finish. Is it that clear, Pierre? Pierre? Please write the answer in the chat. Okay, it is clear, Pierre. Okay, thank you. I think we already know where are you from. Did someone have trouble copy pasting the pin, the red pin in the map? Okay. Seems that no troubles over here. Okay. So these two parts were learning a little bit how to use this Miro board. Okay, and let us know where are you located. Did everyone Let us know where are you from. Okay, yeah, there was a new pin over here. Okay, so we are going to move forward to the third part of the webinar, and I will bring everyone to me again. Okay, so this is the problem solution table. So first of all, we are going to identify the different problems that you have or that you know that could happen in the recycling plastic world. So we have here the different parts of the value chain, and we already have added some problems that had been identified in the interviews in the collection, recycling, and articles manufacturing. But you could help us add in more problems that you have identified in sorting, preventing, life cycle, as well in collection, recycling, and articles manufacturing. So first of all, we're going to add all the problems. So I'm going to add a timer for this to work all together. So we will have 5 minutes to work on this. Do you want some music? I will pick up some music maybe. If you don't want music, please pick it out. So we'll set the timer in 5 minutes. So please let us know the different problems that you have identified in the collection, sorting, recycling, converting, articles, manufacturing, and live service. Remember that we are talking about plastic recycling, and I don't know, Mathilde, if you want to add something else in the to the instructions.
No, I think it's quite clear. Thank you, Carolina. Yeah, I think just adding the different problems that are linked to the different part of the value chain. Yeah, and then we will check what are the, let's say, the biggest issue and the one that we can solve.
Right now, we're just adding the problems, so don't write the solutions, please. Focus on just the problems. Here, you're adding post-its all around the workshop. I think you learned how to do it, right? Post-it and arrows.
Carolina, I think Pierre has put something in the chat.
Yeah.
Check and help him.
Yes. I can see Pierre around the Miro board adding different sticky notes with arrows. I think you already succeed, didn't you? Pierre, I will check my screen and I will explain it again, okay? In this part, and I know you're here. So Pierre, check my screen, please. So I will add a sticky note, for instance. I will make it a little bit bigger. I will write Pierre. And you will have this blue dots around it. So if you click and drag, you will move the arrow around it, and maybe you could create it, you could drag it till the other element, in this case, another post-it. If you only click in the blue dot without dragging, you will create another sticky note. And I think that that was the thing that you were doing. So click, stay clicking, and drag. Let me know if that explanation was okay. Okay, so we have 1 minute left. Or writing down the different problems. We still don't have information in live service. Is someone working in live service or in converting? Maybe you could add some information over there. I see that there are some people writing down right now. I will add 2 minutes more. Oh, Mathilde, people is asking what is live service.
Yeah, sorry. I had to go back to the Teams. So live service is well, technically during the material is in use. So it can be, for example, the fact that some electronic equipment or yeah, let's say like not working after only a couple of years. So for example, this is a problem that could be identified in live service. So this is really when you have the article at home.
Like maintenance?
Yes, for example. The fact that you cannot repair it or, you know, those kind of elements.
Okay. To the newcomers that are accessing the webinar, we are right now in the Miro board. I will copy paste the link again. You can access the workshop in the Miro board that we are working in the identification of problems related with plastic recycling in the whole value chain. We have 20 seconds left. I will add 1 minute more, and I think that that will be it for this part. That's it, Pierre. Remember that if you have any question or issue, you can write it down in the chat and we will solve it or add it to the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Okay, Matilda, we have 25 seconds left. Should I add 1 minute more or because people are still writing, I will add 1 minute more.
I think yes, yeah. But everyone is quite productive.
Yes. We have a lot of answers over here. I just added 1 minute more as well because I see that there are a lot of people still writing down their answers. Okay, so we have 1 minute left. Twenty-five seconds left. Five seconds left. And time's up. So thank you all for writing down the different problems that you have been encountering in the plastic recycling value chain. Now we are moving to the solutions part. So the main idea is to grab add a sticky note, write down the solution, and then relate this solution to the problem. So you can add an arrow over here. Okay, so we will have 5 minutes as well in this part. 5 minutes. Do you hear the music? Because I
Yes.
don't. Oh, you can. I can't. we have 2 minutes left. Thank you, Melis, for attending the webinar. You will have the recorded version in our YouTube channel and in our Primus webpage. Remember, if you have any question or trouble in the Miro board, you can write it down in our chat, in our Teams chat, and we will try to solve it. I will add 2 minutes more because it seems that people are still writing down solutions. Seems that funding for research is a great solution in different parts of the value chain. Hmm. Okay, we have 1 minute left. I think it will be enough for all of you. Thirty seconds left. Ten seconds left. And time's up. So thank you all for those solutions. This orange one is for collection, or where should we put it?
I
The
think
one
it's written throughout, so I think it's like throughout the whole value chain.
Okay, so
yeah, it's
it's
an
over here.
overall comment.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, so thank you all for participating in this problem solution identification. Your answers are great, and I think that you have learned a lot of how to use the Miro board and relate the sticky notes from the solutions to the problem. So now the next step is to rate both the different problems and the different solutions. So first of all, we're going to vote in our problems. So I'm going to create a voting session. How many votes? 3 or 5, Mathilde?
I think we can put 5.
Okay.
According to the number of problems that have
According
been
to the number of-
identified, I think 5 is good.
Okay, so we will have 5 votes for all the problems. So I will give you 4 minutes to read around the different problems and identify the 5 problems with most impact. Okay, so we'll start over here. Join the voting. You will see that there are some plus signs only on the post-its from the problem side. So please read it through and identify the 5 problems with most impact.
Are all the votes of equal value, or is there some kind of rating between the votes?
No, all the votes will have equal value. We have 2 minutes left. I'm having a problem with the Miro board. I don't know why. I will restart the Miro board. I'll come back to you in a sec. Okay, so 5 seconds left. Okay, now the Miro board is preparing the results. So here we have the results. As you can see, quality of streams affected by multi-material objects have 6 votes on the sorting part. Then we have collection system not harmonized in the EU in collection part. Then we have 4 votes for variation in legislation and requirements between countries and creating barriers. 4 votes on the recycling part. And then we have a lot of 2-1 votes over here. Interesting, isn't it, Mathilde?
Yeah, definitely. So we see that there is clearly some point of the design for recycling, especially for multi-material, and also impurities that are for sure disturbing the different waste streams and the recycling afterwards and all the value chain. So tackling this point at the very beginning of the value chain is definitely a good point in order to improve the quality of the waste streams. On the collection, this is also important, of course. So we see that we have rated like quite high the point that are very beginning of the value chain. So tackling the problem at the beginning rather than at the end. So I think this is what we can see in the result. And then the third one was on the variation of in legislation and requirements between the different countries that are creating some barriers. So here again, the lack of harmonization of legislation throughout the value chain, but also throughout the different countries. So going more for regulation rather than directive could be a potential solution.
That would be great. Now we will go through the last part of the workshop of the Miro tool. Then we are going to vote the solution. So we are going to create a new voting session, 5 votes as well. Just for the solutions, should I add the general solution, the sticks and carrots comment? Matilde.
Yes.
We should add it? Okay, so I just add it over here. Okay, 5 votes as well, 3 minutes, and the clock starts kicking. Join voting. Remember that the votes are anonymous, so
I don't think the sticks and carrots comment is up for voting. There's no plus sign next to it.
Is not.
Is it possible to move it to the area where it's up for voting?
Right now I can't. I can't move it.
Well, maybe it's a good summary then that we can discuss.
Yeah.
And now vote on the more specific ones because of course it's an overview.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. 40 seconds left. Ten seconds left for this voting session. And that's it. So now we have over here 5 votes, 2 regulation and incentives to use recyclates, higher taxes for using only virgin plastics. That this is in articles manufacturing. That's a great solution designed for easy dismantling and recycling in the sorting part. So, as Mathilde was saying, tackling the design part. Non-competitive legislation to support cascading approach to circularity, expanding their current waste hierarchy. And then we have a AI development as well as a good solution for sorting. And then we have 2 and 1 vote for the other ones. So thank you for voting, for writing. I think that with this information, we can work beyond the interviews that we already have done and have a greater solution or definition of recyclates, plastic recyclates for the EU. Now, we will move forward to the presentation again. Mathilde, I don't know if you want to add some highlights over here.
Maybe one comment also is that there are 2 votes separately for the funding for research. So altogether that would be 4 votes. So that rate's also quite high because it was in the different boxes. But I think very good input and some very concrete actions have been suggested, and overall kind of harmonizing things and creating more incentives. And then also those sticks. So the carrot and stick typically are quite good.
Yes,
to
that
change
comment
the
is
way
quite
we
good.
do things. Yes.
Okay, Mathilde, so should we move forward to the presentation again?
Yeah, absolutely. Then we can discuss a little bit more about the solution that we have identified during this workshop. So as Carolina said, and thank you very much for participating. Of course, your input is very valuable because we will use it then into the writing of the deliverable that we have on the barriers and opportunities surrounding this legislative interface, but also throughout the whole value chain. So it will be very valuable. If we move on to the next slide. So on the different solution, so here this is what you can see. So what we have defined during the interviews before and what has been defined in today's workshop to check whether there is some similarities or not. So Itziar had put the different solutions that we have identified during the workshop here. So during the interviews that we have done previously, we had setting some mandatory collection rate, also promoting the different EPRs solution, and also promoting separate solutions, separate collection for several streams. And here in today's workshop, we had the white paper, but also communication with EU member states and the policymakers in order to seek for this harmonization of collection. Some producer that could be responsible for recycling for their products, so that the producer would own, let's say, the products and ensure that they are recyclable and recycled afterwards. Also, Some points have been mentioned here into the bioplastics. So to have the balance between the generation of bioplastic and fossil-based plastics, and then throughout the whole value chain, indeed, so having some legislation that will also boost the uptake of the different recyclates, and also to have the funding for research, because of course, if we want to recycle more, we also need more investment and also development of different technologies, but not only development, also implementation afterwards in the existing facilities. So that's for the first part. If we move on to the next slide. So in the recycling, in the interviews, we had quite a lot of input on the different solutions, so improving communication throughout the whole value chain, then having some support for the recycler and the developer of recycling technology, so also related to funding maybe. Then strengthening the standardization activities. I don't think this has been mentioned, but I think this is quite relevant in that sense, in order to seek also harmonization. Then establishing a proper way to enforce and apply the legislation, so to really close the gap between the legislation and the practice. Then having harmonized EU legislation that has been mentioned today as well. And then also implementing sometimes some step-by-step approaches, so with transition periods, so that the industry has time to adapt to new and upcoming legislation. And the prices between virgin and recyclates, that we tend to correlate, but the idea would be, one solution would be to decorrelate those two prices. If we move on to the next slide. In today's workshop, we had several things in so creating some harmonized guideline on sampling and testing for regulating substances. So this is a point that could also be linked to the standardization that has been mentioned in the interviews. So maybe a link can be done here. Changing ppm's level of allowed pulp containing waste, so really having some thresholds or limits that could be achievable and enforceable by research, collection for reuse. So this is the kind of items that have been mentioned in the recycling parts. If we move on. And then in the article manufacturing, so during the interviews, we had an interesting point on the decrease of the material diversity to reduce polymer contamination in the waste streams. So that is really, for example, in some products, we can think about electronics, for example, we have a lot of different polymers within this article, and this is creating complexity in the waste streams afterwards, and also creating some fraction that then cannot be recycled because the volumes are very low, for example, and they create contamination. So this decreasing the material diversity, so it's also linked to design for recycling, can be an interesting point to study. Then the dismantling requirements, it has been mentioned today as well, to improve and also streamline the repairability. Then we had some point on to decrease the impact of products, so to use recycled material, but if not using recycled material, then to have a kind of tax on that point. Then improving the quality of the waste and therefore improving the quality of the products via eco-design guidelines, taxing the products that are not using recyclates, and setting recycled content to boost the uptake of recyclates, so to really create a demand. So that has been mentioned during the previous interviews. If we move on to the next slide. So research has been mentioned here as well, with the funding, of course. Then some regulation and incentive to use recyclates. So that has been mentioned in both. So it seems that it's quite an important solution that has been highlighted by the market. Then a proper alignment with the different legislation, indeed to avoid those conflicts and to have some proper regulation on recycled content. So this, we see some more similarity between today's workshop and the interviews that we have conducted prior. If we move on to the next slide, yes, so for the solution, that is it. I will go for the wrap-up and the next steps. If we move on to the next slide, so what we have seen during this workshop, we have tried to highlight the different barriers and solution really surrounding this waste to product interface. So we have tried to really connect some identified barriers throughout the value chain with some specific solution. So this is what we will study in further detail. We will try to put all of this in the deliverable, so we are sure that we have some right indication from the market, and the work will really contribute to the Primus project. And really on the report on enhancing the systemic actions to boost the circularity of targeted waste streams. With that, if we move on to the next slide, I think, yes, so we can move on to the Q&A. I don't know whether there is any question. I saw one question on the POP at the very beginning.
Yeah, we added just one question on the chat. That is the POP regulation, a part of waste as well as product legislation.
Yeah.
The Annex 4 deals with effective waste disposal, and Annex 5 with recovery strategies for the materials containing these harmful POPs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the POPs regulation has several annexes. You have the Annex 1, which is on the product legislation, and the Annex 4, which is on the waste legislation. The Annex 1 sets threshold for a material. This material can be placed on the market if it has a threshold, a concentration of substances that is below the threshold. Otherwise, it cannot be placed on the market. On the Annex 4, it's a different, let's say, perspective, because it's triggering a status that is called the POP waste. So if you're above the waste threshold for a specific substance, then you trigger a POP waste status. It means that if this material was to be sent to disposal, it needs to be destroyed. Therefore, it needs to be sent to incineration and not landfill, because it would not destroy the substances. Of course, if a POP waste is entering a recycling facility and the recycling facility is able to treat it and to really cluster the POP contaminants within one fraction, then you're allowed to recycle it, because you will not recycle the POP substances, but you will really separate the clean material from the non-clean material. And therefore, you have concentrated the POP waste in one fraction that will be sent to destruction, and then the other part can be recycled because it will be compliant with the Annex 1 and therefore the product legislation. So this is a little bit how the POPs regulation works, and especially on the, let's say, connection between the Annex 1, so on the product, and the Annex 4 on the waste, and the Annex 5 indeed is on the recovery of those material, and it's putting a derogation on the fact that you can recycle it, provided that you concentrate the POP substances within one fraction to be destroyed. So I think that answers the question.
Yes, and I think that we don't have any other question. So maybe we can move forth, or if someone has a question, can raise their hand or write it in the chat. Okay, so no questions over here, or maybe if you are writing a question, we will go back to this part. Okay, so
Carolina, you're muted.
Thank you, Mathilde. I was muted. Sorry for that. So, okay, so in this part, and yes, you answered Joshi's question. Thank you, Mathilde. If you have another question, please write it down and we can go back to the Q&A part. Okay, so I wanted to explain that in the Primus project, we have two stakeholders community. We have the industrial community and the citizens community. So we would like you to invite you to the industrial Primus stakeholder community. Based on what we have heard today, there seems some issues that we could help each other with a community. But who has time to actually do the hard work of running the logistics and keeping the community at work? So this is where we can help, because Primus can build this community with you, given you have, well, we have some Primus resources to support the community. So, okay. So what we can do, being realistic. In the first part, we have the expertise. You can build your expertise in the circular economy around recycling plastic, not only because we share the newest insights from our project, but you will also have the opportunity to hear news that community members share. This way, you will not be left out, but of course, you can pick and choose what themes and topics feel most relevant for you. And not to worry, unlike forgetting yourself to endlessly scroll in social media, we will agree with you what will be the good rhythm to take in information. So far, we have the Primus newsletter that is published every month or 2 months. So we foresee to contact you with new insights around 2 times a month on average, if that's okay with you. We will also exchange experiences with others who are facing similar issues and learn firsthand about and from each other failures and success. So, okay, we get that you don't really want to tell everyone about your failures, but perhaps exactly because you do not, this kind of online community with Primus can provide the opportunity to reach out to those who you will not be in touch with in your daily business, and learn from the experiences in different countries with different contexts and different parts of the value chain, and see how to build these links in the whole value chain with different stakeholders in the Primus community. So Primus Online community is not anonymous. It will offer changes to meet like-minded people without the nagging feeling that you have to share too much. So this exchange part will be like this. And then the third part is expression. You can have a strong voice when making relevant issues visible and explaining your point of view to decision makers and other stakeholders. So the University of Tallinn that is leading this community, they think that they could help creating a declarated paper, or having different thoughts of this stakeholder group with the decision makers, and let them know the community real and tested problems that they will have. Okay, so when what if you are a Primus research, we can hear you better, and thus we are better able to reflect your interests and views in the designing and planning and research in the Primus project as well. We can see what kind of tools and activities we suggest to have more realistic plastic value, recycled plastic in added value products, and we will help you as well and let you know what is our internal process in Primus and our failures for you to know. Okay, so we are inviting you to be part of this industrial Primus stakeholder. You can, one of the activities that we have, and we are inviting all, not only our industry stakeholder community, we are inviting everyone to the next online webinar that we have a Boston plastic recycling webinar series. And then the next chapter is about plastic sampling processes and outcomes. We will have Mathilde as well in this webinar, and we will have Jarkko Saarinen, that it's a professor and scientific excellence manager at the Primus project. He's from the University of Finland, and in the webinar we will analyze how to prove compliance with product legislation and explore plastic sampling techniques in order to achieve quality recycling. So we are going to show you in this webinar one of the outcomes of our Primus project with Jarkko and Mathilde. So Itiar, if you could paste the link to the webinar registry, it will be, thank you for that. So you can join the webinar, and if you want, you can learn more about our project by joining the industrial community that I already told you about, following this link. Please, it's here if you can copy paste it as well, and you can be part of our newsletter where we send every 2 or 1 month a newsletter with our latest news. So thank you all for being here. I don't know if we have any question. I'll go back. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mathilde, and thank you, Anna, for being here. Seems that we don't have further questions. So I wanted to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and we will publish it in our YouTube channel and in our website. So thank you all for being here. And if you want to have more news and know about the plastic recycling latest innovations, join our community and our newsletter. Thank you all.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Carolina, and everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.